هذا خصهم رشيباريلنا أدين ما أنا شنداجي عازليا نبتشدي أنتو نبتشبايزان بالي.
Good evening. So last week we looked at the point, or the question that how to respond when others act towards us in an unskillful or an unkind or even a harmful manner. We saw that no matter how others act towards us, it is inappropriate to respond in kind. And the reasons given for that include that for ourselves having the aspiration to become bodhisattvas, to join other bodhisattvas in the fulfillment of their heart wish of leading all beings to the state of lasting happiness, and by doing so, or whilst doing so, not causing any harm to others, thereby, when we respond to the harm of others, we should do so in a way that does not cause them harm. Because, again, if we respond in a way that causes them harm, this is contrary to the aspiration that we have given rise to. Moreover, it will lead to, responding in a harmful manner will be an impediment for the further cultivation of good qualities within us, particular, or for example, that of patience. So continuing in the text, we start a subsection from this 52nd verse, going up to the 63rd verse. So, reading the 52nd verse. Since the mind is not material, in no way can anyone ever destroy it. But through it tightly clinging to the body is harmed through pain and suffering. Here we commence a subsection, again in the context of patience, the patience of dealing with harm from others, in particular harm from others by means of speech. So looking at the first two lines, since the mind is not material, in no way can anyone ever destroy it. So the point that is being made in the first line is that the mind is not form, it's not material. Why? Because it is consciousness. So therefore, the mind not being material cannot be harmed by something that is material or that is form. So our mind cannot be harmed by the speech of others. And speech or sound waves, this is something material, it has form. And it cannot harm our mind, which is immaterial in that it is consciousness, or it's not matter, it is consciousness. So therefore, when we're wanting to protect our mind, we need to be very clear what causes harm to our mind. It is actually not the words of others, and it's not even the thoughts of others. So if others criticize us or belittle us, or if they disagree with us or hold other views or opinions, this will do nothing to our body. It will not harm us physically at all. So just as the translator, the last sentence I said, the words of others cannot harm our body, I meant mind. The words of others cannot harm our mind. So looking at these two lines, it's to get us to come to recognize that the words from other people cannot harm us. Therefore, why get angry about what others say to us? Because our mind is consciousness. It is not formal matter. So therefore, the physical behavior or the speech of others, both of which are formal matter, cannot harm our consciousness, our mind, because it is of a different type. It is not something material, but it is consciousness. So therefore, as the words of others actually cannot harm us, why get angry? The Bodhisattvas have reflected well and seen that, reading the first two lines, since the mind is not material, in no way can anyone ever destroy it. So Bodhisattvas have reflected well on this as a reason not to get angry or not respond with anger. For ourselves, such reflection hasn't yet produced that result. And this we can see in how we think we need to protect our mind from being hurt by what others say. So when others speak to us in an unkind manner, expressing unhappy thoughts or negative thoughts to us, towards us by means of their speech, we think we need to protect our mind from harm. Because we have not thought deeply about this. We think these words and the thoughts of others can somehow do our mind harm. We haven't yet to come to recognize that in reality, the words of others and the mind behind them cannot cause us harm. So therefore, we grasp at our mind and we try and protect it by means of usually anger. So here we see the great mistake in this method to provide us protection, because it's this method to protect us that actually causes us harm. When anger arises as a means of self-defense, it is actually that means that harms us. It's our afflicted response to what others say or what others think. It's our afflicted response that causes us harm. Bodhisattvas have reflected well on these points. They've recognized that there is no valid reason to take the words of others seriously, to take them seriously in the sense of grasping them as real, grasping at this entire situation as true. This, though, is how we respond. Why? Because we haven't reflected well like Bodhisattvas have. We take the situation, we take the words that are uttered and what the motivation of the person saying these words, we take this all as real, as true, we grasp at it, our afflictions arise, and we suffer. So what the Bodhisattva has recognized is that what causes us suffering is not the words of others, it's our afflicted response to those words. Moreover, due to the rise of the afflictions, not only do we suffer now, but we create, especially through an afflicted response, we create the causes, the karmic causes, for future suffering too. So this is something that we can understand intellectually, and therefore, by reflecting on it repeatedly over a sustained period, whilst the mind is calm and still, we can, through developing habituation, change the way we respond. It's difficult, it's not really possible to do in the moment. It needs to be done beforehand. It needs to be done many times. And then slowly, one will start to change the way one responds. And as part of one's motivation here, aspire to be like the Bodhisattvas. And with that motivation, train like the Bodhisattvas. The third and fourth line. But through it being the mind, tightly clinging to the body is harmed through pain and suffering. So this points to that by our mind clinging tightly to the body, that faulty way of thinking actually harms us. It is our own mind that ends up harming us. So therefore, again, it's our afflicted way of thinking that actually is what causes us physical harm. It's because of clinging to our body, wanting thereby to protect what we value so, that we end up justifying an afflicted response, justifying responding in kind. So this is something that we can recognize, that we do justify standing up for ourselves, pushing back against the harm that we receive, even though we are doing it with a mind that is dominated by afflictions. Bodhisattvas and ourselves have a very different response to when harm is directed towards us. So for ourselves, when harm is directed at ourselves, our body, or those that we consider mine, so our loved ones, our group that we identify with in a particular context, or possessions, because we perceive this harm as so real, we justify an afflicted response. Bodhisattvas, though, deeply trained in the Dharma, will not view the situation in the same way at all, and therefore respond very differently. moving into the 53rd verse, but the 52nd and 53rd come together. So, from the link between the two is clinging to our own body tightly, we respond in an afflicted manner. The 53rd verse. Since those who speak with aggression or contempt and in ways that are unpleasant can thereby cause no physical harm, why then, mind, do you get so angry? So looking at the whole 53rd verse, but keeping in mind the whole 52nd verse too. So the body is material, words too are material, so sound waves are material, but consciousness is not material. So therefore, something that is material cannot harm what is immaterial. So there are 2 points then that we take away here. The way others act or speak towards us, so those are the 2 points, act or speak towards us, actually cannot harm our mind. And in fact, the words of others, whilst material, lack sufficient force or strength to harm our body. So whilst words and our body are both material, words lack the force, the strength to actually harm our body. So if what others are saying or doing actually cannot harm our mind at all, and if the words of others cannot harm our body, then, in the 4th line, why then, mind, do you get so angry? So for example, when others speak to us in an unpleasant way or an aggressive way or show us contempt, our mind will get upset. But our mind is upset because of our way of thinking, our way of responding to those words, not the words themselves. And then later that night, if we cannot sleep, it's not those words keeping us awake. It is the way our mind is thinking about them. So this illustration then points to that what is causing us harm is our way of thinking, in particular our afflicted response to what we encounter. So the meaning here, the meaning to take away of these 2 verses is to recognize the very limited impact that words from others have on us in reality, and that the harm that the words and the thoughts that motivate the words have on us, the harm that they have on us, comes from our way of thinking, our afflicted response. So taking this to heart then will greatly enhance our ability to respond with patience, with an undisturbed mind, no matter whether others are talking down to us or aggressively towards us or unkindly. We will not take it personally, we will not grasp at it as true. This thereby enables us to be patient, to be undisturbed in the face of what they are saying towards us. Bodhisattvas relate to what they encounter. In this context, we're primarily talking about the speech of others. They relate to it in a way that's very different from ourselves. They do that because, and solely because, they've heard these teachings and reflected on them deeply over a sustained period. And thereby, they have come to understand both intellectually and through repeated reflection, they can respond intuitively to the words of others by recognizing that the words of others cannot harm one's precious body. If the words of others, if someone says what someone said hurt me, you can ask them, show us the mark on your body, where's the bruise? You can't be shown any bruise from the words of others. All that can be pointed to is that my mind became unhappy, maybe deeply distressed, but that's all. And how did the mind become unhappy? By means of sound waves appearing to our ear sense organ and our ear sense consciousness, and thereby, from the ear sense consciousness, being interpreted by the various mental consciousnesses. So therefore, where the unhappiness or the suffering is experienced is in the mind, and it's come about through the way our mind is relating to what in essence is solely sound waves. So it's our mind interpreting the sound that has led to, it's the way our mind has interpreted the sound that has led us to suffer. The sound itself, those sound waves themselves, can cause no harm, not to our body, not to our mind, solely our way of thinking. So, through training the mind, one's way of thinking will change, and thereby sound speech can no longer cause pain. So in your meditation, you can engage in you can imagine going to a bodhisattva and asking for advice on how to deal with the unkind words of others, when others have spoken to you aggressively or shown contempt or spoken in some other unpleasant way. You can imagine then the bodhisattva saying, show me the mark that those words left on your body. And of course, you have no mark to show them. And then the bodhisattva will ask, then explain to me how sound waves can harm consciousness. And someone educated in the Dharma will understand that the form or matter, that is sound waves, cannot actually harm consciousness. And then you can imagine the bodhisattva saying, so it was your conceptual consciousnesses, your thoughts, in relation to the sound that had appeared to the ear sense consciousness, that way of thinking was that caused you your pain. And then you acknowledge that is the source of one's pain, one's way of relating to sound waves, interpreting the sound, putting it into words, and imputing meaning to it. So therefore, the bodhisattva, again this is in our reflection, is pointing out to you, it's your way of thinking about what is said in that is causing one's pain. In particular, not merely understanding, putting words to that sound, but adding meaning to those words, such as taking it personally. It is this way of thinking that causes pain from words. And then you imagine in this conversation, this dialogue, the bodhisattva then giving advice. Advice just like we've heard earlier in this chapter. The way to protect your mind from anger is to protect it from becoming mentally unhappy, the immediately preceding condition for anger, which is when the mind moves from its pleasant, happy state to one of slight disturbance, slightly off balance, off keel. Then the afflictions can easily arise. So by guarding your mind, you actually protect yourself from suffering. So you're hearing again here the same method you've heard many times in this chapter as well as elsewhere. The way to train is to use the reasons presented in the Dharma in relation to the actual events that you have experienced or are likely to experience, and apply this reasoning to what you have or will experience and come to recognize the validity of it. And in this way, one builds up one's habituation to this way of thinking. This is how one trains in patience. What's been presented, I imagine, is not, I don't believe it's overly complicated to understand, but it requires repeated reflection again and again. And this is important because the habits that we have are completely the opposite to this. In society, what we have learned from society, from our upbringing and what we see enacted around us, is that when someone shows contempt for someone or speaks to them in an aggressive manner, we see this as harmful behavior, and we would understand that the person is upset. And we would say to others, and have many times, "Well, I'm so upset because of how someone spoke to me." So this is, therefore, this is a deep habituation that we all have. And to break this requires repeated reflection over a sustained period, using reasons in relation to actual lived experience. Because if we investigate and ask ourselves, so from the words of others, where is the real harm I suffered? Physically, nothing. So mentally, certainly. My reputation, what I think of myself, what others think of me, this kind of thing, sure. But is that in the greater scheme of things, when we think of the kind of harm that beings are experiencing in the world, is it actually such a big thing? And this will help us to calm down a little bit. The only real pain that we experience from our faulty way of thinking is we become a bit upset, our happy mood is lost, and so forth. In the greater scheme of things, if someone calls us ugly or incompetent or says we're not good enough, it's not the end of the world. So that can also help to put things in perspective. But through training in this way, we learn not to focus so much on the insults that others are sending our way, or the storylines we cultivate around that, but rather to look within and to deal with our mind, transform our way of thinking. And in this way, we actually change how we experience the words of others, experience the world. When you take this training presented here and you apply it to your own mind, you'll come to recognize very clearly that when others do speak to us in unpleasant or aggressive or contemptuous ways, we do become unhappy. So what has happened is that in dependence on sound arriving to our ear, sense power, sense consciousness, and mental consciousnesses, we've interpreted it in a particular way and imputed a whole lot of storylines and additional meanings to that, and this has resulted in a suffering feeling and an unhappy feeling arising. And that unhappy feeling is the feeling of suffering. So to say, I am suffering in dependence on the words of others is entirely true, it's entirely correct. But where we need to be very clear is that what has led to our suffering is not primarily the words of others, nor their motivation. It is primarily our way of thinking. Their words, which came from their motivation, sure, this is part of the dependence arising, but it's our way of thinking that led us to suffer. This is important because then we know where to direct our attention. Our attention should not be directed at complaining about them, criticizing them, telling all and sundry about what was the injustice we suffered, but rather to transforming our way of thinking. This is where our attention should be placed. And this is how Bodhisattvas have trained, taking them as role models, aspiring to join them in their endeavor to guide all beings to freedom from suffering. Taking them as our role models, we should train like they have. Moving to the 54th verse. The dislike others have for me, since in this or future lives cannot actually devour me, why then do I find it so unacceptable? Look in the first line, the dislike others have for me. So this now is referencing what others think of us, their opinion they have of us, whether in general or in a specific instance. And that opinion then, not merely staying behind the veil of within their mind, but being expressed. So when others speak to us in expressing contempt or aggression or in some kind of unpleasant way, so those illustrations from the previous verses, saying to us, for example, you're not good enough. How you've done something fails to meet my needs or expectations, or falsely accusing us of something, whatever it may be. Our response is of course one of dislike, of displeasure. We can think of an illustration with a spiritual teacher, someone who has a genuine wish to lead others, and they are falsely accused of taking advantage of their students, being more interested in financial gain than actually benefiting others or whatever. Then, through that criticism, then the teacher's reputation is destroyed, and students who could otherwise be benefited by that teacher will stay away from them. So in a situation like that, where, say, a spiritual teacher receives such criticism, or ourselves in our own lives, when others express their dislike or displeasure towards us, this of course is something that we dislike. So looking at the whole verse, so the dislike others have for me, and again, this is referring to their mind of dislike then is expressed through what they say to us. That dislike they have for us cannot actually cause us harm. Whilst we ourselves may not like it, it may make us unhappy, cannot actually cause us harm. This is the second and third line. Since in this or future lives cannot actually devour me. So the literal for devour me is actually cannot eat me. So like the imagery would be like a monster devouring you. The dislike someone has for you expressed through their words cannot actually devour you. Not now, nor in the future. And this is the reality of it. That as we saw in the previous two verses, the words of others and the mind of dislike behind those words on their own can do no harm to us. Therefore, the fourth line, why then do I find it so unacceptable? And finding it unacceptable links well with the last line in the previous verse. Because when we find something unacceptable, or this can be translated as a displeasure arising, that is the immediately preceding condition for anger to arise. So from our mind going to the negative side, being a bit unhappy, then annoyance, frustration, anger and rage can arise. So in your meditation is presented a further reason to utilize that. The reality is, what others think, whether expressed or not, but here, expressed, cannot actually cause you harm now or in lives to come. Those words and the mind behind them cannot harm you in this or future lives. So when reflecting here, as always, we're using reasons to change our way of thinking, because it's through reasoning we change how we understand what we are encountering. That is how we change our way of thinking, not merely through biting our tongue, but through changing how we experience something through reasoning. So here, think of a situation. Imagine someone that you don't get on with so well. They don't really like you. And so imagine them not being in your presence, so they in their own home, they dislike you, maybe thinking bad thoughts about you, but you have no idea. You have no idea. Are you upset right now? Not at all. You're getting on with your own life. They right now are unhappy. They are thinking about you and complaining and criticizing and all this. You have no idea. So your mind is undisturbed by their mind. So that is the key point to recognize. Their mind, their thoughts, actually can have no impact on your own mind, your own way of thinking, your own happiness or unhappiness. Then move the situation. This person who dislikes you is now before you, and they have all these negative thoughts for you. But let's say they're not expressing it in any way, not through the facial expression or through their speech, or they're expressing it in a way that you do not understand. You don't notice or interpret their facial expression as being unhappy, or they're talking too softly or in a language you don't understand, whatever it may be. So their negative mind is before you. They are expressing it, but you are not picking up on what they're expressing. Again, they are maybe uttering sound, but you are not receiving it. You're not hearing it or understanding it. And their mind is unhappy. Neither, therefore, are hurting you. Or, again, the person is before you, but they now are criticizing you directly to your face, but they have concealed it completely, pretending to be, or saying they're criticizing someone else that you also dislike. So what they're thinking about you, they are expressing about a third person whom you also dislike. Now you will agree, nod and agree, and maybe laugh, because you're agreeing with them. But in their mind, they're criticizing this third person, but really meaning it to you as well. But you're not getting it. So in all these instances we see, because of what's not arise, how your mind is interpreting something, you're not suffering. The mind of the person that dislikes you hasn't changed throughout. The words that they are expressing, these also do not need to change, but it's our way of experiencing their words. Either we don't understand them, or we can't quite make them out, whatever it may be. Therefore, our inner response, the way our mind feels, is completely different. So Bodhisattva will have meditated like this extensively. And then, therefore, even when someone is directly aggressive towards them, contemptuous towards them, saying that you're no good as a practitioner, you're supposed to be a kind-hearted person, but you're just an angry person, or whatever it may be, the Bodhisattva will not be taking it personally, because what dominates their mind is not self-concern, what others think of me, but the person before them who is afflicted and suffering. The Bodhisattva knows that the sound waves emitted from the person before are a reflection of their afflicted mind. That first and foremost. Recognizing, therefore, that this person before them is unhappy, compassion will arise for the suffering being, rather than any self-obsession about what do others think of me. So this is how a trained practitioner experiences the same things. So we can take all of this in this whole segment as illustrations and reflect on it, coming to recognize that what causes us to suffer is our way of thinking. It's not what others think of us, it's not what others say to us, it's how we think of what is said to us. This is where our suffering comes. This brings us then to the 55th verse. As it will hinder my material gain, I find this to be unacceptable. But all this gain will be discarded, whereas my non-virtue will remain securely. So just the first line, as it will hinder my material gain. So this word material we should rather have in brackets. It's not in the Tibetan, and it's the meaning of gain here. We should take more broadly than solely material. Anyway, so we have an understanding from what we've looked at already, that the words of others cannot harm us physically or mentally, but certainly their words can harm our reputation. And by our reputation, what others think of us being harmed, this can harm our livelihood, our prosperity. So through others criticizing me, either directly but within the earshot of others, or speaking behind my back, my material gain will be hindered. Others won't want to do business with me. I may lose my job. Whatever it may be, we can say there are outcomes, negative outcomes, from myself being criticized by others. When others criticize us directly, but within earshot of others or behind our back, then we recognize that this, even if we don't take it too seriously, others will. And therefore, our reputation will be harmed, and that will have a negative impact on our livelihood, our material gain. So, for example, we may be accused of engaging in wrong livelihood, so be deceitful in our business when we are actually not. So then, through us being harmed in this way, the second line, I find this to be unacceptable. This is then all too often the justification for anger. The mind moves to a negative state, and then anger can all too easily arise. So what antidotes to apply here? Now the third and fourth line. But all this gain will be discarded. So this is the first reflection, is to remind ourselves that the material gain that we have, so our wealth, our status and so forth, This is impermanent. The wealth that we have acquired, this, we know, it comes and it goes. And what we've saved, we spend, so it comes and it goes. And in the end, it will all be left behind anyway. So we remind ourselves of the impermanence of our situation. Particular instances don't overly matter in that they are impermanent. And at the end of this life, it will all be left behind anyway. So this, that's our first antidote, the reflection on impermanence, and also in the context of the impermanence of this life. And the second antidote is in the final line, whereas my non-virtue will remain securely. So if one responds in an afflicted manner, one creates negative karma. Those karmic imprints will accompany us by means of our mental continuum to our next rebirth. Our wealth will be left behind, but our good reputation or our bad reputation will be left behind. But the karmic imprints that we have accumulated, they will continue with us. So there are two antidotes presented, the reflection on impermanence and the reflection on karma. In relation to that second one, so always be clear that the lasting effect of what we encounter is the karmic imprints that come from how we think about what we have encountered. Whether our response is afflicted or virtuous, such as a mind of patience. Karmic imprints are accumulated, and those will accompany us. Whereas what was said, what was done, and the impacts of what was said and done, all of this is impermanent. All of this will be left behind in the end. The karmic imprints, virtuous and non-virtuous, those are what matters. Those are what will accompany us. So look at these two verses. These, again, are very relevant to the way in general people respond, what we've learned from society. That when, in the 54th verse, others dislike us, and that dislike they have for us when it is expressed, so usually it's through what people say, then we become unhappy about this. And we become unhappy not just because of what they're saying to me, but what others will think of us. That all too often enhances our unhappiness, thinking that now wherever I go, people will be talking about me. I'm known for what I'm being accused of, whether it's true or not. But this, now my reputation is being harmed. And thereby, one's gain, material gain, or perhaps the potential to be successful in whatever one's activity is now harmed. But here what we are being guided to is to think far more long-term, to recognize what really is of value, not these fleeting incidents. And not these fleeting incidents. And recognize what really causes harm is our afflicted response. So as also said earlier, the way the Bodhisattva responds is so very different. They do not take this personally. They do not take the dislike from others or the words from others as being of importance in terms of what people think of me. And they also recognize, as also mentioned in previous weeks, that it is not a reflection on them, but a reflection on the suffering being before them. And as we've seen here in the 54th verse, the Bodhisattva knows very clearly that the dislike from others and the words of others can do the Bodhisattva no harm in this life, nor in lives to come. Not the mind of others, nor the words of others. But rather, the Bodhisattva, through their deep training, will recognize that this being before them is suffering, and compassion and love for this being will arise. And the Bodhisattva will be primarily concerned about how they can respond so as to ease the suffering of this being. That will be their primary response. And thereby, they are creating incredibly virtuous karmic imprints, and that is what will accompany them in lives to come. No harm from these words will accompany them. If their reputation, the Bodhisattva's reputation is harmed, that harmed reputation does not go to the Bodhisattva's next life. The karmic imprints do. But for the Bodhisattva, they're not even thinking about their own karmic imprints. Their concern is the suffering being and how they can help them. And the final point to make in terms of how the Bodhisattva would respond to criticism or accusation, and that we should also learn from, is that when a Bodhisattva is criticized or accused of something, and the criticism or accusation may be valid, or it may not be. So there may be, the Bodhisattva may be accused of doing something they did or did not do. The Bodhisattva's primary concern is for the suffering being before them, and will respond in a skillful way, so as to, at the very least, not inflame the suffering of the being before them, and ideally to reduce the suffering of the being before them. But the Bodhisattva will also need to protect their own reputation, so as to ensure they can benefit others, that others do not unnecessarily avoid the Bodhisattva, stay away from the Bodhisattva, because of what this person is saying, which may be true or not. The Bodhisattva, by being concerned with the welfare of others sincerely and genuinely, will have love and compassion and patience dominant in their mind. This means their mind is unafflicted, which means their wisdom can arise. They can think clearly, because the afflictions cloud the mind, prevent the Bodhisattva from, the person from thinking clearly. The Bodhisattva's mind being unafflicted, they can think clearly, respond skillfully. And part of this skillful response will be to both help the suffering being before them and to address any potential harm to their reputation. So if the Bodhisattva deems that the best response is to explain what happened, the Bodhisattva will do so. If the Bodhisattva deems that the best response is for now to apologize and leave it at that, that's what the Bodhisattva will do. And perhaps later explain what happened. So the key point here is twofold. Firstly, that the Bodhisattva will be able to respond skillfully because their mind is not dominated by the afflictions. This is part of the great benefit of having trained well in these various reasons. One can respond genuinely, love, compassion, and wisdom. And thereby, one can help the suffering being before you. And the second key point is that if one's reputation can be defended, then do so. If there's nothing that really can be said or done, then there's nothing that can be said or done. But if one's reputation can be protected, either by saying, "You're right, I messed up," or "I didn't do it, this is what happened," and saying that immediately or saying that later, by having an unafflicted mind, one can protect or restore one's reputation. Whereas on the other hand, if one's mind is dominated by the afflictions, one will respond unskillfully, and whether one is falsely accused or not, one's reputation will be harmed by one's unskillful response. So we can conclude there for tonight, but I imagine with the sound of the falling rain, no one's in a particular rush to get outside. So if you have questions, then feel free to ask. Then thank you, and good luck in the rain.